Hi, my name is Andrew Irwin. I am a third year studying secondary education with a minor in history, and today I will be speaking on the importance of multicultural education within social studies slash history, specifically within American schools. So basically, when I chose this topic, I was thinking about how my subject field, history, can benefit from multicultural education and being in a diverse classroom. I feel like history is definitely one of those classes where there's a lot you can do with the subject matter. And I believe that taking certain steps to kind of implement more focus on minority history, especially, can be very beneficial to a general classroom. So, the current state of history within the United States education system is very Eurocentric. So, it kind of describes Europe as a more like civilized kind of society than other parts of the world, especially colonial countries, as history has progressed. It's mainly due to the fact that kind of seeing, like from the European perspective, seeing someone in a colony as someone different, alien, it is reflected within their histories, whether it be recorded via words or actions. And going off of that, the whole idea of history being written by the victor, um, when we look at how European countries interact with other cultures, it kind of carries into how history is described. So, for instance, a lot of Western cultures will see Native Americans as kind of a group that was there first, but they don't really put too much thought into their own history. It's kind of just once we showed up, that's when history started. And because of that, a lot of the time, other minority groups have their own history silenced, simply because either the um, Western kind of culture does not want their stories known, or they simply did not place any value on them and they were lost to history. Another thing that's important to look at when it comes to multicultural education is the race of students within classrooms in the US. Um, if you take a look at this graph, you can see a very disproportionate amount of students, depending on race, when it comes to where they live. So, for instance, rural towns have 71% white with a few smaller minority groups of Hispanics, Blacks, and Asians. And as you can see within cities, it's much more mixed, and it's based around socioeconomic status. And there tends to be a trend that inner cities are less better off socially and economically, and that's reflected in the composition of their classrooms. Another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with this is the race of educators. Um, Many educators go into schools where students are very diverse, and especially with new teachers, they don't always know exactly what they're going to get into once they're placed in a school. And it's important to understand that a lot of these schools have certain percentages of students who are minorities, and making sure that educators are cleared on kind of the composition of their classrooms is very important. If you look at this table, it kind of just shows that the vast majority, almost 82% of educators within the US are white. And not to say there's anything bad about this, but because of it, a lot of the time, these educators don't have the same experiences, whether it be how they were raised, their own culture, religion, as a lot of these students who are minorities. And because of that, there's a sort of divide between students and teachers when it comes to their experiences. And that carries into the curriculum, kind of just knowing that educators have a certain life experience and that may guide what they deem valuable in their own curriculums. When it comes down to multicultural education, I believe that it's very important because, especially now, as minority groups begin to become less minorities, the composition of the United States race is changing dramatically in the past few years. And because of that, it's important to expose people to these new groups, new cultures. And in one of my papers that I read, it was said that rural white residents tended to view education about minority groups as irrelevant to their communities. And that goes back to the graph talking about kind of how rural schools are predominantly white. And because of that, they may not feel it necessary to learn about these other cultures because they don't interact with these people as much. But I believe that multicultural education is very important because it gives these groups more of an experience of other people. Because without it, they may either be afraid, just uninterested, or uncomfortable when they do interact with these other groups, minority groups specifically. And also that studies have shown that many teachers entering the field have a lack of knowledge when it comes to diversity, whether it be culturally, religiously, racially. And I think that's important to kind of change that. I think that not just educators, but students graduating need to be equipped with these tools to interact with other groups, because without them, our own social structures can suffer from that because of, like I said before, the fear of things that are different. And this goes back to my specific field, history. I believe that history is very special because the way that it has been molded. I feel like a lot of minorities, whether it be their writings, other forms of history, have been suppressed. And because of that, the Eurocentric curriculum, some ideas are just deemed too radical, or the ones that do persist, they may be dismissed. Great example is Malcolm X. I had the pleasure of reading one of his books, his autobiography, in high school. And a lot of the time, these books are banned within U.S. schools. And because of that, these ideas are not kind of wrestled with. I would say that it's more important to be exposed to these ideas and talk about them, because after that, the students can grow and better experience other cultures. And I think another reason that history, minority history, is kind of special in the U.S. is because a lot of our history is based around racial violence. Even from the very beginning, our founding began with the idea of equality, the value we place on people. And ever since then, we've still been struggling with it. And I think that in our history classes, we need to kind of take a different approach on this and really say exactly what happened, because I feel like a lot of time it's whitewashed, and people don't really understand how much conflict has arisen due to race in the United States. And because of that, I think that it's important to kind of keep that in mind when we are teaching students. And looking forward into my time as a teacher, ways to kind of combat this is using minority history to supplement the usual curriculum. Things like Common Core don't always give you the ability to create your own unique lesson plans in some ways that you might want to. But I think that it's important to keep in mind that you don't have to change your curriculum completely. I think it's important to rather supplement, whether that be through music, art, writing, or film. say, for instance, you're talking about World War One, kind of speaking on groups like the Harlem Hellfighters, like a black regiment within the U.S. Army, things like that. Just small asides, but still very relevant ones, can kind of expose students to minority history and kind of show how it's influenced our own history, and kind of how it influences us today. And then also, with these diverse classrooms, it's very beneficial to include students' own experiences, whether it be their own personal experiences with race, or their parents, relatives, um, because a lot of the time people are living history, and their own stories can really tell us a lot about how race has influenced history within the United States, especially. And then this kind of ties into after school programs, um, whether it be clubs, just meetings, or things like during lunch, kind of just giving students the ability to be exposed to more um, viewpoints. I think it's definitely something that a lot of institutions should do if they don't already. And I feel like that's something that I would like to implement in my own classrooms. Yeah, thank you.